Hi, everybody. We're back, and as you can see, I am back in my classroom. I'm sort of going to go back and forth between teaching at home and teaching in the classroom. So, for today's video, classroom. And for today's video, this is the last, well, second to last, it's the penultimate of our Beowulf videos. We're going to take the section of the final battle, and we're going to split it into two because it's the rest of the book. So, for today's reading, I want you to pick up, scroll down in your textbook. We are doing, as we have been, Seamus Heaney's Beowulf. And I want you to scroll down to page 151, and we're going to be picking up with line 2210. We're going to back up just a smidge, but we're going to basically start with 2210 there. Okay, so what you need to know about this section. We're jumping forward in time 50 years. Beowulf is an old king now. He's ruling Geatland. After the death of Hygelac, he inherited part of the kingdom. We saw that at the end of the last part of the story. And he's been a good king for 50 years. But now, just like he was warned by Hrothgar, right? Don't get complacent. And just like Hrothgar said, you know, I was a good king and then this monster came along to threaten my kingdom and I couldn't protect my people. We know this story is very into foreshadowing, right? So here we go. Oh, by the way, when we get to the ... in the text on this page, that is because we are missing parts of the manuscript. Remember, we talked about this when we read the introduction, that the one manuscript we have was burned in a fire and we're actually missing pieces of the text. So where you see that ... it's not that they left anything out or they're skipping stuff. It's just stuff we don't have and therefore can't translate. Okay, so picking up on the top of 151 here. He ruled it well, it being Geatland. He ruled it well for 50 winters, grew old and wise as warden of the land, until one began to dominate the dark. A dragon on the prowl, from the steep vaults of a stone-roofed barrow where he guarded a hoard. There was a hidden passage unknown to men, but someone managed to enter by it and interfere with the heathen trove. He had handled and removed a gem-studded goblet. It gained him nothing, though with a thief's wiles he had outwitted the sleeping dragon. That drove him into rage, as the people of the country would soon discover. So, some hobbitses or some thief had gone all up in this dragon's barrow, and it's ancient even for these people. So they call it a heathen barrow. They don't even know who this barrow was made to honor. If you are familiar with Lord of the Rings, right, which we've referenced before, remember they went into like those barrows and they had the dead kings and all the treasure? That's this kind of thing, okay? Someone snuck in one and it's been a hoard of dragon treasure. They kind of didn't even know the dragon was there, but this guy has snuck in, stolen this goblet, and woken the dragon, and the dragon is mad and is taking it out on everybody. The intruder who broached the dragon's treasure and moved him to wrath had never meant to. It was desperation on the part of a slave fleeing the heavy hand of some master, guilt-ridden and on the run, going to ground. But he soon began to shake with terror. In shock, the wretch panicked and ran away with the precious metalwork. There were many other heirlooms heaped inside the earth house, because long ago, with deliberate care, someone, now forgotten, had buried the riches of a high-born race in this ancient cache. Death had come and taken them all in times gone by, and the only one left to tell their tale, the last of their line, could look forward to nothing but the same fate for himself. He foresaw that his joy in the treasure would be brief. Okay, so the person who stole the treasure from the dragon didn't even care that it was treasure. It didn't go there to steal necessarily. They were a slave. They were desperate, trying to get away from a bad master. Went in for to get away, to hide, happened to see the treasure, grabbed one, and ran. Perfectly sensible behavior, really. And now we're kind of flashing back to when this barrow was originally built. We don't know who built it, these ancient people. Um, and imagine being the last of an ancient race, burying everybody else you ever knew, and knowing that even though there's all this treasure, it's not going to do you any good because everybody you know is dead. Those of you who read the Wanderer poem, right? You see the connections there. Okay, that might be a good thing for your notes. Yes, connections to Anglo-Saxon poems. Okay, so we're in a flashback here to when these barrows were new. A newly constructed barrow stood waiting on a wide headland close to the waves, its entryway secured. Into it, the keeper of the hoard had carried all the goods and golden ware worth preserving. His words were few, so maybe he carved this or wrote it somewhere. Now earth, hold what earls once held, and heroes can no more. It was mined from you first by honorable men. My own people have been ruined in war. One by one they went down to death, looked their last on sweet life in the hall. I'm left with nobody to bear a sword or burnish plated goblets, put a sheen on the cup. The companies have departed. The hard helmet hasped with gold will be stripped of its hoops, and the helmet shiner who should polish the metal of the war mask sleeps. The coat of mail that came through all fights, though shield collapse and cut of sword, decays with the warrior. Nor may webbed mail range far and wide on the warlord's back beside his mustered troops. No trembling harp, no tuned timber, no tumbling hawk swerving through the hall, no swift horse pawing the courtyard. Pillage and slaughter have emptied the earth of entire peoples. And so he mourned as he moved about the world, deserted and alone, lamenting his unhappiness day and night until death's flood brimmed up in his heart. That's really, really sad. We're starting off, we could be like, oh wow, all the treasure, but we're not. This is like the remnants of a broken, forgotten, dead people, and the one person who was left is left alone, and the treasures don't do him any good, so he buried them with his people and left. Definitely connections to the Wanderer, if you read that in week 4. Okay. Then an old harrower of the dark happened to find the hoard open. We're going to get description of the dragon here. The burning one who hunts out barrows, the slick-skinned dragon, threatening the night sky with streamers of fire. People on the farms are in dread of him. He is driven to hunt out hoards underground, to guard heathen gold through age-long vigils, though to little avail. He guards this gold, but it doesn't do him any good. For 3 centuries, this scourge of the people had stood guard on that stoutly protected underground treasury until the intruder unleashed its fury. He hurried to his lord with the gold-plated cup and made his plea to be reinstated. So the slave who stole the cup from his master, who was mad at him for whatever, he stole the cup and he took it back to his master to give it to him and beg for his place back, and to, beg to be forgiven for whatever it was his master was mad at him for. Then the vault was rifled, the ring hoard robbed, and the wretched man had his request granted. His master gazed on that find from the past for the first time. All right, so the slave took the gold cup back to his master. The master said, "Where did you get this?" The slave showed him where he got it, and the master went in and took a bunch of gold and took stuff. Okay. Then the dragon awoke. Trouble flared again. He rippled down the rock, writhing with anger, when he saw the footprints of the prowler who had stolen too close to his dreaming head. So may a man not marked by fate easily escape exile and woe by the grace of God. So this dragon saw the footprints, but the guy had already gone, and he's like, just by the grace of God, he got away. The hoard guardian, be the dragon, scorched the ground as he scoured and hunted for the trespasser who had troubled his sleep. Hot and savage, he kept circling and circling the outside of the mound. No man appeared in that desert waste, but he worked himself up by imagining battle, and then back in he'd go in search of the cup, only to discover signs someone had stumbled upon the golden treasures. So the guardian of the mound, the hoard watcher, waited for the gloaming with fierce impatience. Gloaming is like twilight. His pent-up fury at the loss of the vessel made him long to hit back and lash out in flames. Then, to his delight, the day waned, and he could wait no longer behind the wall, but hurtled forth in a fiery blaze. The first to suffer were the people on the land, the farmers, but not before it was their treasure giver who would come to grief. I'm sorry, but before long it was their treasure giver who would come to grief. The treasure giver would be the king. Okay, so the dragon comes out. He's been just storming all day, just angry all day. And he waits for night. Why? Because evil things come out at night. We've already discussed this, right? And he comes out and he just burns up the land and burns up the farms and burns up the houses. The dragon began to belch out flames and burn bright homesteads. There was a hot glow that scared everyone, for the vile sky winger would leave nothing alive in his wake. Everywhere the havoc he wrought was in evidence. Far and near, the Geat nation bore the brunt of his brutal assaults and virulent hate. Then, back to the hoard he would dart before daybreak to hide in his den. He had swinged the land, swathed it in flame, in fire and burning, and now he felt secure in the vaults of his burrow. But his trust was unavailing. Then Beowulf was given bad news, a hard truth. His own home, the best of buildings, had been burnt to a cinder, the throne room of the Geats. So Beowulf was off doing whatever, and someone brings him the message, hey, your house got burned up. So your throne, your treasure, the center of the kingdom, burnt to a crisp. It threw the hero into deep anguish and darkened his mood. The wise man thought he must have thwarted ancient ordinance of the eternal Lord, broken his commandment. He's like, what did I do to make God mad at me that he would burn down my house, right? But we know that it isn't that Beowulf did anything wrong. His mind was in turmoil. Unaccustomed anxiety and gloom confused his brain. The fire dragon had razed the coastal region and reduced forts and earthworks to dust and ashes, so the war king planned and plotted his revenge. The warrior's protector, prince of the Hall troop, ordered a marvelous all-iron shield from his smithy work. He well knew that linden boards would let him down and timber burn. Okay, so he's like, okay, we've got to solve this. We've got to deal with this dragon. But in order to protect myself going into battle, I can't carry a wooden shield, which is usually what they carried, right? Because that'll just burn up. And I can't carry something that's going to melt. So make me an iron shield. That'll be stronger. After many trials, he was destined to face the end of his days in this mortal world, as was the dragon for all his long leasehold on the treasure. Okay, so we're already being told this is Beowulf's last fight and the dragon's last fight. They're both going to go, well, down in flames together. Yet, the Prince of the Rings was too proud to line up a large army against the sky plague. We're getting some great kennings for the dragon. He had scant regard for the dragon as a threat, no dread at all for its courage or strength, for he had kept going often in the past, through perils and ordeals of every sort, after he had purged Hrothgar's hall, triumphed in Herat, and beaten Grendel. He outgrappled the monster and his evil kin. One of his cruelest hand-to-hand encounters had happened when Hygelac, king of the Geats, was killed in Friesland. The people's friend and Lord Hrethel's son slaked a sword blade's thirst for blood. But Beowulf's prodigious gifts as a swimmer guaranteed his safety. He arrived at the shore, shouldering 30 battle dresses, the booty he had won. There was little for the Hetware to be happy about as they shielded their faces and fighting on the ground began in earnest. With Beowulf against them, few could hope to return home. Okay, so they're like, Beowulf is not scared of this dragon because he has faced worse things before, or at least he considers them worse. And not only was it Grendel and Grendel's mother, but like there was this whole other time when Hygelac got killed and Beowulf had to swim to save his people, and he was carrying like 30 things of armor to come basically help his troops. And he arrives and everybody's like, oh, Beowulf's here. Across the wide sea, desolate and alone, the son of Ecgtheow swam back to his people. There Hygd offered him the throne and authority as lord of the ring horde. With Hygelac dead, she had no belief in her son's ability to defend their homeland against foreign invaders. So that was, remember, Hrothgar's queen basically gives the kingdom to Beowulf because she's like, I don't think my son can protect us. Yet there was no way the weakened nation could get Beowulf to give in and agree to be elevated over Heardred as his lord, or to undertake the office of kingship. But he did provide support for the prince, honored and minded him until he matured as the ruler of Geatland. So remember, one of the things about Epic is mentoring. Beowulf mentored Hygelac's son until he got old enough to run his kingdom by himself. So Beowulf didn't like usurp the kingdom just because he could. He respected the line of succession, but he mentored the king's son until he was ready to be king himself, and basically like took care of the kingdom. Then over sea roads exiles arrived, sons of Othere. They had rebelled against the best of all the sea kings in Sweden, the ones who held sway in the Schiffling nation, their renowned prince, lord of the mead hall. That marked the end for Hygelac's son. His hospitality was rewarded with wounds from a sword. Heardred lay slaughtered, and Onla returned to the land of Sweden, leaving Beowulf to ascend the throne, to sit in majesty and rule over the Geats. He was a good king. Okay, so that son that he mentored until he could be of age and be a good king, yeah, he made the crucial mistake of taking in these people who then betrayed him and killed him, basically in vengeance. And then they go away again, and Beowulf kind of at this point has to take over the kingdom. But he's been a good king. So this flashback is showing us Beowulf has overcome problems in the past to protect the land in a variety of different ways. Some of them about being respectful, and some of them about being in battle and like doing physical things. In days to come, he continued to avenge the fall of his prince. He befriended Eadgils when Eadgils was friendless, aiding his cause with weapons and warriors over the wide sea, sending him men. The feud was settled on a comfortless campaign when he killed Onla. So the guy who sent people to kill Hygelac's son, Beowulf eventually kills him and ends that feud. Why do we care about all this? Well, it's setting up Beowulf as a good king, as a problem solver, as a respecter. Excuse me. Okay. And so, and we're going to come back to the present here. And so the son of Ecgtheow, Beowulf, had survived every extreme, excelling himself in daring and in danger, until the day arrived when he had come face to face with the dragon. The lord of the Geats took 11 comrades and went in a rage to reconnoiter. So he and 11 other guys, remember he took guys before to go fight Grendel, he and 11 other guys, not at all like the 12 disciples, are going to go get the lay of the land and figure out what's going on. By then, he had discovered the cause of the affliction being visited on the people. The precious cup had come to him from the hand of the finder, the one who'd started all this strife, and was now added as a 13th to their number. They press-ganged and compelled this poor creature to be their guide. So that slave who stole the cup, Beowulf basically like asks in his kingdom, how the heck did this start? He finds out, and he gets that poor guy, that poor slave, to come with them and show them where the treasure is, where he took it from. Against his will, he led them to the earth vault. He alone knew. An underground barrow near the sea billows and heaving waves, heaped inside with exquisite metalwork. The one who stood guard was dangerous and watchful, warden of that trove buried under earth. No easy bargain would be made in that place by any man. So now they've checked it out and they know what it looks like, and they're trying to make a plan. The veteran king sat down on the cliff top. He wished good luck to the Geats who had shared his hearth and his gold. He was sad at heart, unsettled, yet ready, sensing his death. His fate hovered near, unknowable but certain. It would soon claim his coffered soul, part life from limb. Before long, the prince's spirit would spin free from his body. Our poet has kind of given up on foreshadowing and is just straight up telling us now. Beowulf is going to die, and Beowulf kind of knows he's going to die. He feels it. And he says goodbye to his friends, and he's got to figure this out. Beowulf, son of Ecgthraus, spoke. Many a skirmish I survived when I was young, and many times of war. I remember them well. At 7, I was fostered out by my father, left in charge of my people's lord. King Hrethel kept me and took care of me, was open-handed. Remember, that means he's kind and generous. Behaved like a kinsman. While I was his ward, he treated me no worse as a wean about the place than one of his own boys, Hereberd or Hrethin or my own Higelac. For the eldest, Hereberd, an unexpected deathbed was laid out, though a brother's doing, when Hetherson bent his horn-tipped bow and loosed the arrow that destroyed his life. He shot wide and buried a shaft in the flesh and blood of his own brother. That offense was beyond redress, a wrong footing of the heart's affections, for who could avenge a prince's life or pay his death price? It was like the misery felt by an old man who lived to see his son's body swing on the gallows. He begins to keen and weep for his boy, watching the raven gloat while he hangs. He can be of no help. The wisdom of age is worthless to him. Morning after morning he wakes to remember that his child is gone. He has no interest in living on until another heir is born in the hall, now that his firstborn has entered death's dominion forever. He gazes sorrowfully at his son's dwelling, the banquet hall bereft of all delight. The windswept hearthstone, the horsemen are sleeping, the warriors underground. What was, is no more. No tunes from the harp, no cheer raised in the yard. Alone with his longing, he lies down on his bed and sings a lament. Everything seems too large, the settings and the fields. Wow. That is such a poignant description of grief. The idea that, people try and tell you, okay, well, someone will come along or some good will come from this, but all you can do is see the loss and think, the world is too big. Wow. And we're getting backstory on Beowulf's childhood. He was raised in the household of the Lord, along with the Lord's own sons. But that the middle of the sons, out hunting or practicing or something, accidentally shot the older of the sons and killed him. Such was the feeling of loss endured by the Lord of the Geats after Herebald's death. He was helplessly placed to set to rights the wrong committed, could not punish the killer in accordance with the law for the blood feud, though he felt no love for him. Because how are you going to punish one of your sons for killing the other when it was an accident? You can't pay yourself the blood debt. You can't ever feel the same way about him. What do? Heartsore, wearied, he turned away from life's joys, chose God's light and departed, leaving buildings and lands to his sons, as a man of substance will. Then, over the wide seas, Swedes and Geats battled and feuded and fought without quarter. Hostilities broke out when Hrethel died. Ongentheow's sons were unrelenting, refusing to make peace, campaigning violently from coast to coast, constantly setting up terrible ambushes around Hrensen Hill. My own kith and kin avenged these evil agents, as everybody knows, but the price was high. One of them paid with his life. Hæthcyn, lord of the Geats, met his fate there and fell in the battle. Then, as I have said, Higlac's sword was raised in the morning against Ongentheow, his brother's killer. When Eofor cleft the old Swede's helmet, halved it open, he fell, death pale. His fewed, calloused hand could not stave off the final stroke. Okay, so when the old king basically gave up living because he couldn't he didn't know how to cope with his son's death and his other son's accidental murder of his brother, and he gave up living. And we don't know if he actually killed himself or if he just kind of gave up and died, but he dies. The middle son, the one who accidentally killed his brother, becomes king, but because he's young and because the surrounding tribes sense vulnerability, they come in and attack. So there's the battles. And all of this is stuff Beowulf's basically sitting down and as an old man telling everybody what he's been through, telling everybody all these wars that used to happen. But remember, he's brought peace to the kingdom. So these young people he's talking to probably don't remember these wars. So he's giving them like a history lesson. Then when the middle son was killed in battle, right, Hygelac becomes king, the youngest son. The treasures that Hygelac lavished on me I paid for when I fought. The fortune allowed me with my glittering sword. He gave me land and the security land brings. So he had no call to go looking for some lesser champion, some mercenary from among Gifhas or the Speardanes or the men of Sweden. I marched ahead of him, always there at the front of the line, and I shall fight like that for as long as I live, as long as this sword shall last. Foreshadowing. Which has stood me in good stead late and soon, ever since I killed Dayraven the Frank in front of the two armies. He brought back no looted breastplate to the Frisian king, but fell in battle, their standard bearer, highborn and brave. No sword blade sent him to his death. My bare hands stilled his heartbeats and wrecked the bone house. Now, blade and hand, sword and sword stroke, will essay the horde. Beowulf spoke, made a formal boast for the last time. I risked my life often when I was young. Now I'm old. But as king of the people, I should pursue this fight for the glory of winning, if the evil one will only abandon his earth fort and face me in the open. So he's like, I'll fight you, dragon. Come on out and face me. Then he addressed each dear companion one final time. These fighters in their helmets, resolute and high-born. I would rather not use a weapon if I knew another way to grapple with the dragon and make good my boast, as I did against Grendel in days gone by. But I shall be meeting molten venom in the fire he breathes. So I go forth in mail shirt and shield. I won't shift a foot when I meet the cave guard. What occurs on the wall between the two of us will turn out as fate, overseer of men, decides. I am resolved. I scorn further words against this skyborn foe. So he kind of wants to go in with no weapons because it doesn't use weapons, but then he's like, yeah, but it kind of does because it's going to spit fire and it has poison, and going in with no weapons is a bad plan. So he's going to use his shield, he's going to wear his armor, he's going to take his sword. Men at arms, remain here on the barrow, safe in your armor, to see which one of us is better in the end at bearing wounds in a deadly fray. This fight is not yours. So he's like, you stand here and you watch and you witness, but this is not your fight. This is my fight. Nor is it up to any man except me to measure his strength against the monster or prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle, will bear your lord away. Then he drew himself up beside his shield. The fabled warrior in his war shirt and helmet trusted in his own strength entirely, and went under the crag. No coward path. Hard by the rock face, that hale veteran, a good man who had gone repeatedly into combat and danger and come through, saw a stone arch and a gushing stream that burst from the barrow. This stream isn't water, this is fire, blazing and wafting a deadly heat. It would be hard to survive unscathed near the horde, to hold firm against the dragon in those flaming depths. So he can't go in and fight the dragon in the cave or in the hoard because it's just fire everywhere. So he's got to get the dragon to come out. Then he gave a shout. The Lord of the Geats unburdened his breast and broke out in a storm of anger. Under gray stone, his voice challenged and resounded clearly. Hate was ignited. The horde guard recognized a human voice. Sorry for that. Okay. The horde guard recognized a human voice. The time was over for peace and parleying. So Beowulf can't make peace with the dragon the way he has with these other troops. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. There was a rumble underground, down there in the barrow. Beowulf, the warrior, lifted his shield. The outlandish thing writhed and convulsed and viciously turned on the king, whose keen-edged sword, an heirloom inherited by ancient right, was already in his hand. So he's got this ancient sword. Roused to a fury, each antagonist struck terror in the other. So the dragon's actually afraid of Beowulf, and Beowulf is afraid of the dragon. Unyielding, the lord of his people loomed by his tall shield, sure of his ground, while the serpent looped and unleashed itself. Swaddled in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing toward its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought and fate denied him glory in battle. Everything is going wrong for Beowulf, right? He had this huge shield made. This is the first time that things are not going right for him, and he's going to lose. So the king of the Geats raised his hand and struck hard at the enameled scales, but scarcely cut through. The blade flashed and slashed, yet the blow was far less powerful than the hard-pressed king had need of at that moment. The mound keeper went into a spasm and spouted deadly flames when he felt the stroke. So even though he didn't kill the dragon or even seriously hurt the dragon, it hurt. And so the dragon's thrashing around in anger and fear and pain and spurting fire. Battle fire billowed and spewed. Beowulf was foiled of a glorious victory. The glittering sword, infallible before that day, failed when he unsheathed it, as it never should have. For the son of Ecgthrow, it was no easy thing to have to give ground like that and go unwillingly to inhabit another home in a place beyond. So every man must yield the leasehold of his days. So this is his sword, his shield is melting with all the fire because it's iron, right? And even though it's strong, iron melts in a fire. And his sword is not doing any damage and has broken. So now he's got a broken sword and a melting shield, and he knows he's going to die. Before long, the fierce contenders clashed again. The horde guard took heart. The dragon inhaled and swelled up and got a new wind. He who had once ruled was furled in fire and had to face the worst. So Beowulf is surrounded in fire. No help or backing was to be had then from his high-born comrades. The hand-picked troop broke ranks and ran for their lives to the safety of the wood. Okay, all his guys he left and said, let me handle this, right? They see him surrounded in dragon fire and they book it and run to the woods. But within one heart, sorrow welled up. In a man of worth, the claims of kinship cannot be denied. So one guy doesn't run. His name was Wiglaf, son of Weirstens, a well-regarded chiefling warrior related to Aelfhere. Of course, right? We get his family history. When he saw his lord tormented by the heat of his scalding helmet, he remembered the bountiful gifts bestowed on him, how well he lived among the Wemundings, the freehold he inherited from his father before him. He could not hold back. One hand brandished the yellow timbered shield, so he has a wooden shield. The other drew his sword, an ancient blade that was said to have belonged to Eanmund, son of Othere, the one Wostin had slain when he was in exile without friends. He carried arms to the victim's kinfolk, the burnished helmet, the webbed chainmail, that relic of the giants. But Onla returned the weapons to him, rewarded Weohstan in Eanmund's war gear. He ignored the blood feud, the fact that Eanmund was his brother's son. Okay, this is like the history of his war gear. Why is this here? Well, to show us that Wiglaf's comes from a proud family and that what he's carrying is important, like it's special stuff. Weohstan kept that war gear for a lifetime, the sword and the mail shirt, until it was the son's turn to follow his father and perform his part. Then, in old age, at the end of his days among the Weathergeats, he bequeathed to Wiglaf innumerable weapons. So Wiglaf is a very young man, and the armor he's wearing and the weapons that he's carrying came from like his grandfather's time. And his father's been keeping them until he was, as heirlooms. And now, when he was very old, he gave them to Wiglaf. And Wiglaf's never been in battle before. And now the youth was to enter the line of battle with his lord, his first time to be tested as a fighter. His spirit did not break, and the ancestral blade would keep its edge, as the dragon discovered as soon as they came together in combat. Okay, we're going to end there for today. We have possibly a new warrior arising as Beowulf falls, right? Okay, so you can start filling out your notes and then hold off and we'll read the rest of the story and then we'll discuss and finish our notes. But for now, bye everybody.